That being said, with stimulus, as Bill mentioned, and with the list that you've seen, there are a lot of projects going on. There are a lot of on-the-ground things going on. This is probably the biggest one, but with LWA moving back to 2011 based on $54 million to Park Service in the stimulus project, the date had slipped to 2013. That money gets it back on track to 2011 for the removal of the 2 dams. You know, that's another national, international significance project. So what we're going to try to do is, you know, ultimately we've talked a lot about building a dedicated funding source. There's some concepts running around in the legislature at the moment that might help us do that in this session. We'll see how those turn out, including the hazardous substance tax, potentially increasing that in the short term. But the other option here, and I put this down as the special district legislation. I probably should rewrite this. Some sort of a dedicated funding source in some sort of a framework, but trying to figure that out to bring a proposal to the legislature next session is the basic game plan here. It may not be a special district, it may be a statewide thing, it may be something else, but we need to get going on this, in my view, and so that would be a big piece of focus in terms of creating this dedicated long-term funding source so you have reliable funding going forward.
I actually think you've narrowed it too far.
Okay.
By virtue of your 1 and 2 there. I really think we ought to be looking at a broader base, broader group of funding options.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree. That's what I was trying to say. Yeah, okay. I agree with you.
Well, you're not, okay, I agree with that.
Because there's a lot of legal, there's a lot of different strategic things to think about. If you do a district, it takes potentially 2 votes, arguably, to create the district and then create a funding source. So that's too narrow.
Some of us are skeptical about whether, about these districts. I mean, but I guess we're not here to talk about each one of these ideas. What we're trying to do is go through your.
Well, that's helpful to suggest that you ought to pursue whatever option makes the most sense.
Exactly.
And given the need is to provide adequate funding to deal with all these issues. There may be any number of ways to do it. And so we shouldn't limit ourselves to just this one option.
Yeah.
For sure. Similar to that is the next piece, which would be, so I'll rework that, Bill. I think that's a good point. The second part would be to advocate directly out of the context of a new funding source for increased state funding for the action agenda and evaluation of additional state resources that can be brought to bear. Importantly, number 2 would be to ensure that all of our sister agencies have adequate funding to implement the action agenda, and then to work in the third quarter to submit and advocate for adequate agency budgets at the state level to make this happen relatively straightforward. I would point out, though, I think one of the roles we potentially could play is as an advocate for the other agencies. This is a big, DNR, DFW, ecology play a huge role in this, and others, and their budgets have been dramatically curtailed. In addition, with MOTCA, the hazardous substance tax getting essentially raided for the general fund for 2 years. There's some issues here. So I think we could play a role in terms of trying to be an advocate and help, and they could be an advocate with us, and we're trying to do that through the state caucus and building those sort of aligned program around the action agenda. I think the other thing that's going to be good, and I'm looking at NACI here in the audience, it's not DNR, but I think being able to really demonstrate why the actions and proposals in our budgets are the right things to do for Puget Sound, kind of back to the first conversation, is going to be helpful in terms of making the sale here, I think, with the legislature. So that'll be good.
One thing I wondered that came up yesterday, and it is, some of these action areas, like urban accounts, are going to seek funds on their own. So I'm not sure that, I think there ought to be some recognition in this that, you want to kind of, I don't know, help coordinate that or at least, facilitate it to the extent you can, because sometimes they can get funds in a different way, like through tribal organizations that are part of their groups. So, you know, I think that you're talking about organizing among the state agencies. I think you're broadening that to include these integrated organizations.
Well, this area right here is a good example of it. Gotten funds for restoration here from all over the place.
Right.
We shouldn't stand in the way of it.
We should recognize that that's another source, and these folks are going to take the initiative on their own. in a lot of cases.
David, I would just say two things. One is, I'm assuming that in all of your work there's a communications component. But I'm sure that's understood. But the B2, I only say this because it's called out. I mean, the legislature gave us this responsibility last year, and that is ensure state agencies, and I would put an asterisk and say oil spill recovery. We really need to advocate for that. I mean, because that's been a stated job of ours, and we don't have the funds really to do it adequately. But I think we need to acknowledge that that's one of our responsibilities. I don't know if we're going to hire somebody to do that. We've got 150,000, or if that's going to fall to you. But I think we need to say that out loud in somebody's work plan.
And then at the federal level, we've begun a lot of work trying to evaluate the variety of sources that we could potentially tap at the federal level. We've obviously done a lot and done well with EPA. We did a lot with NOAA with the stimulus. The stimulus package was pretty wide-ranging with the Park Service and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. But we think we need to take this kind of to another level in terms of the level of specificity and have it basically a federal game plan that's holistic. Given the state of the state, probably leaning more on the federal government in the short term is going to be a more winning formula, so we're going to invest some time and energy there. The third piece of the funding equation obviously is from the private sector. As you know, we've had the Foundation for Puget Sound that's been created under the statute, and it's essentially waiting for a mission, and I think we're gearing up. So the idea here is to work with the foundation to try to get going on a potential capital campaign to bring more private resources to the table. We've had some interesting meetings in the last couple of weeks with some potential donors who are interested in the concept here. We're just trying to figure out how to make that all work. Probably starts with hiring a staff at the foundation and getting going on that. So Jerry, as you know, Jerry Grinstein is the former head of Delta and is the chair of the board and is ready to go. And I think this could be a place where we could really be different by being able to maximize private funding, going to a variety of groups and to important projects on the